The twin suns of Arden, 9 hung low in the dusty sky, their light turning the world into a haze of orange and gold. Miles Rayner wiped the sweat from his brow and pulled his worn leather gloves tighter. He hated frontier markets, the noise, the smell, and the strange mix of creatures that filled every corner. Voices shouted in dozens of languages, metallic and wet and echoing. The air was thick with smoke, spice, and oil. It made him want to turn around and leave, but his old cutting rig had burned out 2 days ago. Without new equipment, there would be no timber, and without timber, there would be no food. He pushed through the crowd, his heavy boots sinking into the red dust. Alien vendors barked offers, flashing teeth, scales, and tentacles. Every few steps, someone tried to sell him something: synthetic meat, energy cells, or bottles of glowing liquid that claimed to enhance stamina. Miles ignored them all. He just wanted a new plasma saw. Something strong, reliable, human-made if possible. Human worker. Over here. A sharp voice rose above the noise. Miles turned. The speaker was small and green, with narrow yellow eyes and long fingers that curled like hooks. The alien stall was cluttered with tools, scrap, and cages covered in old tarps. The creature smiled in a way that made Miles uneasy. "You look strong," it said in broken standard. "Strong man needs strong help, yes?" Miles frowned. "I just need a plasma saw." "Ah, better than plasma saw," the merchant croaked. "Better deal. Human-like bargain, yes?" The alien tugged a cover from one of the cages. Beneath it sat a figure, small and thin, wrapped in a filthy sack that covered its head and most of its body. The figure's hands were tied, and its knees pulled close to its chest. It trembled slightly. Miles's jaw tightened. "What the hell is that?" "Servant," the alien said. "Rare kind. Works long, eats little. No complaint." "I'm not buying a slave," Miles said flatly. "I want a tool, not a prisoner." "Not slave," the alien insisted, its smile widening. "Helper. Good worker. Strong. Obeys command. Very loyal." Miles started to turn away, disgusted. But then the figure flinched when the merchant stepped closer. Just a small, frightened movement, but it stopped him cold. There was fear there. Real fear. And something about that stirred something deep inside him. He had seen that look before, back during the Terran border wars. Captives waiting for mercy that never came. "How much?" Miles heard himself say, hating the question even as it left his mouth. The alien's eyes gleamed. 3 months of timber. 1, Miles countered. "And you throw in a power cell for my rig." After long haggling filled with growls, curses, and gestures, the deal was done. Miles handed over the credits and led the bound figure away, his stomach heavy with guilt. He didn't know what he was going to do with this person. All he knew was that leaving them with that thing felt worse. The ride back to his outpost was silent. The small figure sat in the back of the crawler, sack still over its head, shivering slightly whenever the vehicle hit a bump. Miles kept his eyes on the barren horizon. The world outside the windows was nothing but endless forest and red soil. When they finally reached his cabin, a sturdy block of wood and metal built by his own hands, Miles stopped the engine. Smoke drifted from the chimney. The air smelled of pine and fuel. He got out, opened the rear hatch, and helped the trembling figure down. "It's all right," he said quietly. "No one's going to hurt you here." Inside, the cabin was warm and quiet, filled with the faint hum of solar batteries. The figure stood awkwardly near the door. Miles could see the sack moving slightly with each frightened breath. He took a deep breath himself. "I'm going to take this off," he said gently. "You're safe." He reached forward, fingers brushing the rough rope at the figure's neck. Slowly, carefully, he loosened it and pulled the sack away. For a moment, the world seemed to stop. Under the dim light stood not some alien creature, but a young woman, her skin a pale shade of emerald that shimmered like polished glass. Her hair, long and silvery, fell over her shoulders. Eyes the color of amber widened in terror. Around her neck, a thin metallic collar blinked with tiny red lights. Miles froze. His breath caught in his throat. "You're not a goblin," he whispered. The woman took a step back, trembling. She didn't speak. Her hands were bound, her wrists raw. Miles raised both palms slowly. "Hey, it's okay. I'm not going to hurt you." She didn't move. The cabin filled with the sound of their breathing, sharp and uneven. For the first time since leaving the war, Miles felt something old awaken inside him, something he thought he'd buried forever. Human compassion. And it terrified him. The morning came early on Arden 9. A thin mist hung above the forest as pale sunlight filtered through the leaves, painting golden streaks across Miles's cabin. Inside, the silence was heavy. The strange girl, who had slept curled up in the corner like a frightened animal, was awake before him. She sat with her knees pulled close, eyes darting toward every faint noise the house made. Miles rubbed his face, feeling the roughness of stubble under his hand. He wasn't sure what to do. He hadn't planned to bring anyone home, least of all someone wearing a shock collar. He had bought her to save her, that much was clear, but what came next, he had no idea. He stepped into the kitchen area, pretending to focus on the coffee unit. "You hungry?" he asked. The girl didn't answer. She just watched him, her golden eyes alert but unreadable. The collar around her neck blinked once, then faded back to a steady red light. Miles felt a twinge of anger. Whoever had put that thing on her deserved a bullet. He placed a metal cup of water and a piece of bread on the table, then motioned gently. "It's safe. You can eat." After a long moment, she moved, slow, cautious steps like she expected a trap. Her fingers were delicate, almost too thin, trembling as she picked up the bread. She took a small bite, hesitated, then another. Miles leaned against the counter, studying her. The faint green tint of her skin seemed almost translucent in the morning light. She wasn't entirely human, but close. Too close to ignore. "You understand me?" he asked. She froze. Then, slowly, she nodded. That tiny gesture hit harder than words. He sat down across from her. "What's your name?" Her lips parted slightly, voice soft and musical, almost like a whisper carried on wind. "Lyra." Miles repeated it under his breath. "Lyra. All right. I'm Miles." He tapped his chest, then pointed to her. "Lyra." She gave a hesitant nod again. He wanted to ask more, where she came from, who enslaved her, but each time he opened his mouth, she flinched like she expected pain. So he stopped. Instead, he busied himself fixing one of his old thermal jackets. When he offered it to her, she hesitated before pulling it around her small frame. The sleeves hung loose, but she hugged the warmth tightly. Hours passed. Miles worked outside, cutting logs by hand since his plasma saw was still dead. The rhythmic swing of his axe helped him think. The girl watched from the window, silent, her expression unreadable. When he came back in, she was standing near the shelf where his warm medals lay, old, dusty reminders from another life. She pointed at one, her brow furrowed. "That," he said, wiping sweat from his face. "Old war. Long ago." Her gaze softened for the first time. "You fought," she said quietly. Her voice was clearer now, the translator embedded in his DNA syncing with her tone. "Yeah," Miles said, setting the axe aside. "Fought so people could be free. Funny how the galaxy still finds ways to chain them." Her eyes lowered. "Chains," she whispered, touching the collar on her neck. Something inside Miles hardened. "We're taking that off." Her head snapped up. "You cannot," she said sharply. "It will kill." "Maybe," he said, moving closer, "but we'll find a way to disable it. You're not staying in that thing." Lyra's lips trembled. "Why help me?" Miles paused. The answer came simple. "Because someone should have helped you before." For the first time, a faint smile touched her face, small and fragile, like sunlight breaking through clouds. That night, Miles barely slept. The wind outside howled through the metal beams of the cabin. Every so often, he'd glance at the girl curled up on his couch under a blanket. The blinking red light of the collar cast a faint glow across her face. He wondered what kind of monsters could capture something that looked so human, so afraid. And deep down, he knew that whatever her story was, it wasn't over. Someone would come looking for her. He just didn't know yet that when they did, the entire frontier would burn. The next morning arrived with the low hum of generators and the smell of damp earth after the night's rain. Miles stepped outside, his boots sinking slightly into the mud. His mind was restless. He couldn't stop thinking about Lyra, about her frightened eyes, her strange collar, and the silent weight she carried. Inside the cabin, she stood near the window, watching the forest like she was expecting ghosts. Her movements were cautious but graceful, every motion deliberate. When the light caught her hair, it shimmered faintly, almost metallic. She didn't look like a slave or a servant. She looked like someone who didn't belong on this planet at all. "You slept?" Miles asked, trying to sound casual. She nodded once. Yes, the air is calm here. Her voice was a little stronger now, her accent soft and melodic. It reminds me of home. Miles leaned against the doorframe. Where's that? Your home. For a long moment, she didn't answer. Then she turned toward him, her expression distant. Far from here. Too far to reach without the right stars. He frowned. You mean another system? Lyra hesitated, then lifted a hand to the collar at her neck. The tiny red light pulsed faintly, matching the rhythm of her heartbeat. This, she said, voice low, prevents me from saying too much. It listens. It punishes. Miles's stomach turned. Listens? You mean it's recording? It transmits, she whispered. They know I live. Miles felt cold spread through his chest. He moved quickly to his workbench and grabbed a small scanner. Then we'll find its signal. He powered the device, a handheld piece of military tech he'd kept since the war. Blue lines flickered across the screen, searching for transmissions. For a moment, there was only static, and then, faint but steady, a repeating pulse. There, he muttered. Short-range beacon. Probably encrypted. Lyra's expression darkened. They will come. Miles looked up sharply. Who? Those who made me property. He clenched his fists. Not while I'm breathing. She studied him for a moment, as if trying to measure his resolve. Then she said softly, You are not like others. Never wanted to be, he replied. For the rest of the day, Miles worked to jam the signal. He rigged the scanner to emit interference from his cabin's solar grid. The process was messy and dangerous. One wrong move could fry every circuit in the building. But by sunset, the pulse on the screen began to fade. Lyra watched quietly, her eyes following every motion. You risk much, she said. Freedom's worth it, Miles answered. For anyone. She tilted her head slightly, as if considering his words. Humans always fight for freedom, even when it hurts them. He smirked. We're stubborn that way. That night, they ate in silence. The hum of the jammer filled the air, a faint static comfort. But Miles couldn't relax. His mind raced through possibilities. Mercenaries, traitors, maybe something worse. Whoever had enslaved her had the kind of reach that didn't stop at planets like this. After dinner, Lyra stood near the fire, her gaze lost in the flickering flames. When I was taken, she said suddenly, I thought I would never feel warmth again. Miles turned toward her. Who took you? She hesitated, then met his eyes. Raiders. They serve others. A power that hides behind shadow. They took many of us, not just me. Miles's voice dropped to a growl. And sold you like machines. Yes, she whispered. But I am not machine. I am something they fear. Her words hung in the air. Miles didn't fully understand them, but he could feel the weight they carried. Outside, thunder rolled across the sky. Miles checked the scanner again. The signal was gone, but he knew that didn't mean they were safe. Lyra stepped closer, her voice barely above a whisper. They will search for me. They always do. Miles looked at her, the faint firelight reflecting in her golden eyes. Then let them come, he said quietly. They'll find I'm not easy to take things from. For the first time, she smiled, a real one this time. You would fight for someone you barely know? He met her gaze. I already have. Outside, far beyond the forest, a faint red light blinked in the sky, an automated drone sweeping the area, picking up the last trace of her beacon. And somewhere among the stars, her hunters changed course and began their descent. The night was too quiet. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Miles sat by the cabin window, his pulse rifle across his knees, watching the tree lean through the fading glow of the fire. The static hum from his signal jammer had gone silent an hour ago. He didn't like that. Silence meant something had changed. Outside, lightning cracked without thunder, artificial, blue-white flashes cutting across the horizon. Dropships. He recognized the pattern instantly. Low altitude, triangular formation. Whoever they were professionals. They found us, Lyra whispered from behind him. She was still wearing his old jacket, sleeves rolled up to her elbows. Her skin shimmered faintly in the dim light, betraying her tension. Miles stood, checking the rifle's charge. You said they'd come. Guess you were right. Her voice trembled. You can still run. They do not stop once they begin the hunt. He gave a low laugh, dry as dust. Lady, I've been hunted before. By worse than these. Lyra stepped closer, her golden eyes shining with worry. You do not understand. They are not soldiers. They are collectors. They take what they want and leave nothing behind. Miles turned to her, his jaw tight. Then they'll learn humans don't go quietly. He moved quickly, pulling open a floor hatch near the fireplace. Beneath it was an old storage bay filled with weapons, survival gear, and a battered field generator from his war days. He tossed her a small pack. Emergency supplies. Medkits, food tablets, water filter. Her hands trembled as she caught it. You planned for this? Always plan for the worst, he said. That's how I'm still breathing. The first explosion came from the north ridge, a thunderous boom that shook dust from the rafters. The cabin lights flickered. Miles grabbed Lyra's arm and pulled her toward the back door. We need to move. Outside, the forest was alive with chaos. Distant fires glowed between the trees, and shadows of ships cut across the stars. Miles led the way down a narrow trail lit only by the faint glow of his wrist display. Every sound felt amplified, the crunch of leaves, the hum of approaching engines, the soft rasp of Lyra's breath. They're scanning, she whispered. I can feel their minds searching. Miles shot her a glance. They're what? She touched her temple. They use psionic tracking. Thought patterns, fear signatures. They can sense emotion. He gritted his teeth. Then we'll give them something else to feel. He stopped near a fallen tree and planted a small device, a proximity mine shaped like a jagged stone. He armed 3 more along the path as they moved. If they follow our trail, they'll walk right into hell. As they reached a ridge overlooking the valley, Miles saw them, sleek black figures moving between the trees, wearing reflective masks that hid their faces. They carried plasma carbines and tracking drones that hovered like insects. Lyra's voice was barely audible. There are 4, no 5. Her eyes unfocused slightly, as if she could see farther than him. They are close. Miles crouched behind a boulder and took aim. The first drone crested the ridge. One precise shot from his rifle shattered it in a burst of sparks. Then the night erupted. Plasma bolts tore through the forest, lighting up the trees like a storm of fire. Stay down, he shouted, firing in controlled bursts. Lyra crouched beside him, clutching the collar on her neck. The signal, it's reactivated. They're using it to locate me. Then take cover behind that rock, Miles said, grabbing a small toolkit from his belt. He crawled toward her, sparks flashing around them. Hold still. She stared at him wide-eyed. You can't. Trust me. He pried open the collar's outer panel with a knife. Inside, circuits pulsed like veins of red light. He yanked a cable loose, sparks biting his fingers. The collar shrieked with a high-pitched whine, then fell silent. The red light went dark. Lyra gasped, pressing her hands to her neck. It's gone. I can't feel it anymore. Miles gave her a grin. Told you I was handy. Before she could answer, a blinding flash erupted below, the mines. The explosion rolled through the valley, swallowing 2 of the hunters in fire. The others scattered, their visors glowing faintly in the smoke. Miles grabbed Lyra's hand. Time to disappear. They ran deeper into the forest, branches slapping at their faces, the sky flashing behind them as fire spread across the ridge. For a moment, it seemed like they had escaped. But as they reached the edge of the old mining fields, Lyra froze. There's something else, she whispered. A stronger presence. It's not them. Miles turned toward the horizon. A dark ship was descending through the clouds. Larger, heavier, and far deadlier than the others. Great, he muttered. Looks like the boss just showed up. Smoke rolled across the valley like a living thing. The sky above burned with streaks of blue light as the massive ship descended, its engines howling through the clouds. Miles didn't wait to see it land. He grabbed Lyra's hand and pulled her toward the rocky slope that led into the old mining fields. Move, he shouted over the roaring wind. The ground trembled as the ship touched down somewhere behind them. Trees splintered under its thrusters. The air filled with dust and static. Lyra stumbled once, but Miles caught her before she fell. The glow of her eyes flickered in the dark like 2 lanterns. There's a maintenance shaft ahead, he said, pointing toward a half-collapsed tunnel entrance barely visible behind a curtain of vines. We hide there until they pass. They reached the mouth of the tunnel just as another explosion tore through the forest. Heat licked at their backs as they ducked inside. Miles slammed the heavy door shut and twisted the rusted lock. The noise outside faded into a dull echo. Inside, the air was cold and stale. Their breathing sounded too loud in the narrow space. The tunnel stretched into blackness, lined with corroded rails and half-buried machinery. Miles switched on his wrist light, a dim cone of white cutting through the dark. "This place hasn't seen life in decades," he muttered. "Perfect for ghosts like us." Lyra ran her fingers along the wall, her touch delicate. "It remembers," she whispered. Miles gave her a sideways look. "What does?" "The stone," she said softly. "Everything leaves traces of what came before. Fear, pain, hope. It lingers." He shook his head. "You talk like the planet's alive." "Maybe it is," she replied. "Maybe everything is." They walked deeper, their footsteps echoing softly. After a while, Miles stopped beside a cluster of old mining crates and motioned for her to sit. He handed her a water pouch and sank down beside her. For a moment, neither spoke. Only the hum of the distant storm reached them through the rock. Finally, Miles broke the silence. "That ship that landed, it wasn't just a search team. Who are they really?" Lyra took a slow sip of water before answering. "They call themselves the Varn Dominion, a faction that hunts my kind. They believe we are dangerous." "Are you?" She met his eyes. "Only if cornered." Her tone was calm, but there was something ancient behind it, an echo of power she kept buried. Miles remembered how she said she could sense emotions. Maybe more than that. "They fear what they can't control," she continued. "My abilities allow me to feel what others hide. Lies, guilt, hatred. For them, that is power too dangerous to exist." Miles leaned his head against the cold wall, exhaling slowly. "So they cage you to make themselves feel safe." "Yes," she whispered. "And when safety turns to greed, they sell us." The silence stretched again. Somewhere deep in the mine, a drip of water echoed like a ticking clock. Miles stood, scanning the darkness ahead. "We can't stay here long. They'll sweep the area. These tunnels lead south to the canyons. If we follow the old tracks, we might make it out before dawn." Lyra rose, wrapping his jacket tighter around herself. "You should leave me. They want me, not you." "Not happening," Miles said firmly. "You didn't ask to be hunted, and I'm not in the habit of leaving people behind." A faint smile touched her lips. "You are unlike any human I have met." "Yeah, well," he said, reloading his rifle. "Most of us don't live long enough to prove the story's wrong." They started down the tunnel, guided only by his flickering wrist light. The deeper they went, the more the temperature dropped. Strange sounds whispered through the darkness. Echoes, creaks, maybe even the ghosts of the miners who once worked here. Then Lyra froze. "Stop," she whispered. "They are near." Miles killed the light. The darkness swallowed them whole. For a long moment, he heard nothing but the thud of his heartbeat. Then came the sound, metal boots against stone, faint but closing in. "How the hell did they find us so fast?" he hissed. "The collar," Lyra murmured. "Even broken, it may still echo." Miles tightened his grip on the rifle. "Then we stop running." He crouched behind a rock pile, eyes narrowing. The first shadow moved into view, a tall figure in black armor, visor glowing red. Lyra's hand brushed his arm. "There are too many," she warned. "You will die." Miles smiled grimly in the dark. "Then let's make it expensive." He flipped the safety off, breath steady, eyes locked on the tunnel mouth. The hunters had found their trail again. But this time, the lumberjack wasn't running. He was ready to fight. The tunnel filled with the low hum of power cells and the heavy footsteps of armored soldiers. The air was thick with dust, tension, and the faint metallic scent of ozone. Miles crouched behind a fallen beam, his pulse rifle pressed against his shoulder. The old mining shaft flickered with dim emergency lights, pale, red, and ghostly. Lyra knelt beside him, her hands trembling slightly. "There are 6 of them," she whispered. "2 near the entrance, for closing in fast." Miles gritted his teeth. "Good. Less walking for me." She gave him a look halfway between fear and disbelief. "You cannot fight them all." He smirked. "Never stopped me before." The first shot came like a thunderclap, plasma bolts searing through the dark, slicing chunks of rock from the walls. Miles rolled from cover and fired back, his rifle roaring. One of the hunters fell, armor sparking violently. The others returned fire, their weapons painting the tunnel in strobing flashes of blue. "Stay down," Miles shouted, diving behind another column. Lyra covered her ears, the noise unbearable. She could feel their anger, each soldier's mind pulsing with cold precision. They weren't fighting to capture. They were fighting to erase. Miles fired again, hitting a drone that burst in a spray of light. "They've got support tech," he yelled. "They're triangulating." Lyra's breathing grew shallow. She touched the stone wall, feeling the pulse of the earth itself. "There's another way," she whispered. "What?" "Trust me," she said, her voice distant, eyes glowing faintly now. He hesitated, then gave a small nod. "Do it." Lyra closed her eyes and exhaled. The faint shimmer around her skin brightened, threads of silver light tracing along her arms. The air vibrated softly, like the moment before a storm. The hunters paused, their visors flashing. Unregistered energy surge detected, one barked through the comms. Lyra's eyes opened, no longer golden, but radiant white. The tunnel lit up around her as if the rock itself had come alive. The lights on the soldiers' armor began to flicker. Their weapons stuttered. Miles blinked, shielding his eyes. "What are you?" She raised a hand. "Ending this." A wave of blinding light burst outward, silent but powerful. It wasn't heat or fire. It was emotion, raw and pure. The soldiers staggered as if struck by invisible force, clutching their helmets. One dropped his weapon, screaming. Another fell to his knees, his mind collapsing under the weight of feelings that weren't his: fear, regret, sorrow. Miles felt it too, a rush of every emotion he'd buried since the war. Guilt, anger, loss. But beneath it, something stronger: hope. Lyra trembled, sweat glistening on her skin as the light faded. "Go," she gasped. "Before they recover." He moved to her side instantly. "Not without you." "I can't," she started, but he scooped her up without another word. They ran, the tunnel shuddering behind them as systems overloaded from her energy surge. Sparks rained down, illuminating the path like a trail of falling stars. At the far end of the shaft, Miles spotted a lift platform half buried in dust. "Hold on," he muttered, setting her down and smashing the old control panel with the butt of his rifle. The system whined to life, gears grinding after decades of sleep. The lift began its slow ascent. Below them, the tunnel glowed faintly where the soldiers had fallen. Some were moving again, their systems rebooting. Lyra clutched the railing, weak but conscious. "You should not have stayed," she whispered. Miles looked down at her, breathing hard. "I'm a lot of things," he said. "A coward isn't one of them." The platform creaked upward into a wide cavern filled with the wreckage of old machinery. The air was cooler here, carrying a strange hum. Lyra's eyes darted to a symbol carved into the rock wall, a pattern of glowing lines shaped like a spiral. "This place," she breathed. "It's not just a mine. It's ancient." "Great," Miles muttered. "Because fighting in cursed ruins is exactly how I wanted to spend my night." She gave a faint smile despite her exhaustion. "You hide fear with humor. Typical human." He grinned. "And you hide power with silence." Below them, the hunters' voices echoed through the shaft again. Miles adjusted his rifle. "They're not done. We need a way out." Lyra touched the glowing spiral. The light responded to her, spreading across the stone like veins awakening. "There is a way," she said softly. "But it won't lead us where you expect." Before Miles could ask what she meant, the ground trembled, and the spiral opened, revealing a vast, hidden tunnel descending into blue light. She looked back at him, eyes still faintly glowing. "Come, Miles Rayner. If you truly wish to help me, follow me into the heart of the world." And without waiting, she stepped into the light. Miles swore under his breath, tightened his grip on the rifle, and followed. Whatever lay ahead, it wasn't just survival anymore. It was destiny. The light swallowed them whole. Miles felt weightless for a heartbeat. Then his boots hit solid ground. He stumbled forward, blinking against the radiance. They stood in a vast underground chamber, larger than any cathedral he'd ever seen. Pillars of crystal rose from the floor, glowing softly in shades of blue and gold. Rivers of light flowed between them like liquid energy. The air was warm, alive, humming with power. Lyra stood at the center, breathing hard but steady. The glow beneath her skin pulsed in rhythm with the chamber itself. "This place," she whispered, "is older than either of our species. My ancestors called it the core of memory. A living network that remembers everything ever touched by this planet." Miles stared in awe. "And you just knew this was here?" "I felt it calling," she said. "When the hunters arrive, the core awakened. It knows what they serve." Before he could ask, the ground shuddered. A beam of red light sliced through the tunnel behind them, melting stone. The hunters had found the entrance. From the blast emerged a tall figure clad in black armor with silver markings, sleek, commanding, inhumanly still. Target acquired. The figure's voice boomed through its helmet. Lyra of the Lumari. You are property of the Varn Dominion. Surrender or perish. Miles raised his rifle. You first. He fired, but the shots bent midair, deflected by an invisible barrier. The commander stepped closer, each step echoing like a hammer strike. You cannot harm me, it said. Your weapons are primitive. Your courage, admirable, but wasted. Miles spat dust from his mouth. Yeah? Let's test that theory. Before he could fire again, Lyra's voice cut through the air, calm but resonant, layered with power. Enough. The crystals around them brightened, responding to her will. Light rippled outward, filling the chamber. The commander turned toward her, his armor humming as energy shields flared. You cannot control the core, he warned. It will consume you. Lyra's eyes burned white. It already has. The light exploded. Waves of shimmering energy surged across the chamber, and for a brief moment Miles saw images within it, ghostly echoes of the past. Civilizations rising and falling, battles fought across galaxies, stars being born and dying. The core was showing him everything it remembered. The commander staggered, caught in the flood of memory. His armor sparked, overloaded by the sheer force of it. He tried to raise his weapon, but Lyra lifted her hand, and the crystals obeyed. Spears of light shot from the ground, piercing his armor, pinning him midair. The commander's voice broke into static. You cannot stop us all. Lyra stepped closer, her expression unreadable. Then let this world remember your failure. With a final gesture, the core pulsed once more. The commander's armor disintegrated into dust, his form vanishing in a burst of crimson sparks. Silence followed, deep, heavy, sacred. The glowing rivers dimmed to a soft blue. Lyra sank to her knees, exhausted. Miles ran to her side, catching her before she fell completely. Hey, he said softly. Don't you dare pass out on me now. Her eyes fluttered open, still faintly luminous. It's over for now. He looked around. Whatever that thing was, it didn't come alone. The Dominion will send more. Lyra nodded weakly. They will. But the core is awake now. It will shield this place, and me. She placed a trembling hand on his chest. You should leave before it closes. Miles gripped her hand. Not a chance. You think I came this far to walk away? She smiled faintly. Humans. Always defiant. He helped her to her feet. That's our best quality. The chamber began to tremble again, not with violence, but purpose. Crystals shifted, forming a spiral path leading upward. A faint wind brushed past them, carrying the scent of pine, the surface. Lyra looked toward the light. The planet remembers your courage, Miles Rayner. You've changed its story. He gave a half smile. Just doing my part in the galaxy's biggest mess. As they stepped toward the exit, the core pulsed once more, a soft farewell heartbeat. The tunnels behind them sealed, leaving the world's secret hidden again. When they emerged into the open air, dawn had broken over the forest. Smoke still lingered on the horizon, but the enemy's ships were gone. For now, peace held. Miles looked at Lyra as the first rays of sunlight touched her face. So what now? She turned toward the horizon, her expression serene. Now, we make them remember what humanity truly means. He laughed quietly. Guess I'm not a lumberjack anymore. She smiled. No, you're something far rarer. The wind stirred the trees, carrying their laughter into the morning sky. Somewhere deep below, the core of memory pulsed once more, recording every heartbeat, every word, every spark of defiance. And thus began a new chapter in the legend of humanity. A story written not in war, but in light.